Commander Vexthala had lived for 3,000 cycles, fought in countless battles across 17 star systems, and never once felt the cold grip of fear. As a Velthari warrior, fear was an alien concept. Their species had evolved beyond such primitive emotions millions of years ago. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, standing 8 feet tall, with crystalline exoskeletons that could deflect plasma fire, and claws that could slice through reinforced steel like soft flesh. The war against the Krexnari had been raging for 2 centuries, and Zewixthala had carved a name for herself in the blood of her enemies. The insectoid Krexnari were formidable opponents. Their hive mind tactics and acidic weaponry had claimed billions of lives across multiple worlds. But they were predictable. Every battle followed familiar patterns. Every victory came through superior firepower and strategic positioning. Standing on the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Dominance, Zewixthala watched the tactical display with the same detached interest she had maintained throughout her military career. The Krexnari fleet had taken position around the mining colony of Zirian 7, their bioships pulsing with sickly green light as they prepared for another harvesting operation. 37 enemy vessels against her fleet of 52 warships. The mathematics were simple. "Commander, we have incoming transmissions from multiple vectors," reported Lieutenant Caxvera, her communications officer. "Unknown signatures approaching from the outer system." Zewixthala's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Scavenger species often appeared during major battles, hoping to profit from the aftermath. She had dealt with dozens of such interruptions over the years. "Classification?" she asked, not bothering to turn from the display. "Unknown, Commander. The signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Small vessels, approximately 200 meters in length. Crude fusion drives, primitive construction. They appear to be broadcasting something called a warning buoy." This was curious. Most scavenger species fled at the first sign of military action. These newcomers were either remarkably brave or remarkably stupid. Patched through their transmission, the main screen flickered, revealing a bipedal creature with pale skin and strange tufts of hair covering its head. It wore a simple uniform and spoke in a rapid, clipped manner that somehow conveyed urgency despite the universal translator's mechanical interpretation. "This is Captain Sarachun of the UES Defiance, speaking for the Terran Colonial Authority. We are responding to distress signals from Zirian 7. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Zewixthala's secondary eyes focused on the image. The creature was small, perhaps 6 feet in height, with soft-looking skin and no visible natural weapons. Its eyes, though, there was something in those eyes that sparked a moment of interest. Intelligence, certainly, but something else. Something she couldn't quite categorize. "I am Commander Zewixthala of the Velthari Imperial Navy. You are entering an active war zone between the Velthari Empire and the Krexnari Collective. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." The human, for that was what the database identified the species as, tilted its head slightly. "Negative, Commander. There are civilians on that mining station. We don't abandon people in need. The colonists were evacuated 6 cycles ago. Zirian 7 is now a strategic target. Withdraw. Our sensors show life signs in the lower levels. So people didn't make it out. We're going in." Zewixthala felt a flicker of something she couldn't identify. This small, soft creature was refusing a direct order from a superior military force. Either these humans were afflicted with some form of mental deficiency, or they possessed a death wish. "You have 30 of your time units to clear the system," she transmitted. "After that, we cannot guarantee your safety." The human called Chun smiled, an expression that revealed small, blunt teeth. Evolutionary remnants of an omnivorous past, Zewixthala's tactical computer noted. "Hardly threatening." "Understood, Commander. We'll do what we can." Defiance out. The transmission ended, leaving Zewixthala staring at empty space. In her 3 millennia of existence, she had never encountered such inexplicable behavior. The humans had 7 ships, crude, primitive vessels that her sensors could barely classify as military grade. Their largest ship mass is perhaps 40,000 tons, barely a tenth the size of her smallest cruiser. "Commander," Caxvera reported, "the human vessels are accelerating towards Zirian 7. The Krexnari have detected them and are moving to intercept." "Fascinating," Zewixthala murmured. Perhaps she would learn something useful about these humans by observing their destruction. The Krexnari had over 200 fighter analogs in that system, each one capable of melting through a battleship's armor with sustained fire. The tactical display updated as the first wave of Krexnari biofighters screamed toward the human ships. ZYXTALA expected to see the humans break formation and flee. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The human ships accelerated directly toward the enemy formation. Tactical analysis, ZYXTALA ordered. The humans appear to be attacking. Commander, her tactical officer reported, uncertainty clear in his voice. They're firing some form of kinetic projectiles and electromagnetic pulse weapons. On the display, the human ships danced through the Krexnari formation with movements that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Instead of maintaining safe distances and exchanging fire, they closed to point-blank range. One human destroyer, if it could be called that, actually rammed a Krexnari fighter, destroying both vessels in a brief flare of nuclear fire. By the ancient crystals, whispered Caxvera, they're insane. But ZYXTALA was no longer listening. She was watching the tactical display with growing fascination as the human ships carved through the Krexnari formation. Their weapons were primitive, yes, but they used them in ways that no sane species would consider. They sacrificed shielding for speed, armor for maneuverability. They fought like creatures with nothing to lose. And they were winning. 3 human ships remained when the first wave of Krexnari fighters was destroyed. The second wave was already accelerating from the main fleet, nearly 100 bioships, moving in perfect hive mind coordination. This time, ZYXTALA found herself leaning forward as she watched. The lead human ship, the one called Defiance, broadcast on all frequencies as it dove towards Zirion 7's surface. This is Captain Chun to any survivors on Zirion 7. We are beginning emergency extraction. Hold position and prepare for immediate evacuation. The ship's sensors were apparently more sophisticated than they appeared. ZYXTALA's own long-range scanners confirmed what the humans had detected: 17 life signs in the mining station's deep levels, trapped by collapsed tunnels and failed life support systems. The remaining human ships took defensive positions around the station as Chen's vessel descended through the atmosphere. The second wave of Krexnari fighters arrived, just as the Defiance touched down. What happened next will be burned into ZYXTALA's memory for the rest of her very long life. The 2 remaining human ships, both damaged, both outgunned 50-1, charged directly into the Krexnari formation. Not tactically, not strategically, but with a raw, desperate fury that made no sense according to any military doctrine ZYXTALA had studied. The first ship, a small frigate designation, Yorktown, detonated its fusion reactor in the center of the enemy formation. The second, Mumbai, followed suit 30 seconds later. In the span of 2 minutes, 2 human crews had sacrificed themselves to buy time for their comrade on the surface. No orders given, no time for strategic analysis. They had simply seen what needed to be done and done it. For the first time in 3,000 years, ZYXTALA felt something she couldn't immediately identify. A cold sensation in her primary nervous cluster, a tremor in her tactical assessments. The Defiance lifted off from Zirion 7 carrying 17 civilian refugees. Alone now, damaged and surrounded by the remaining Krexnari forces, it began broadcasting again. This is Captain Chun to any ships in the area. Mission accomplished. 17 souls extracted from Zirion 7. If anyone's listening, it's been an honor serving with you all. The Krexnari were closing in for the kill. There was no escape, no tactical solution, no hope of survival. And yet, the human ship accelerated toward the largest concentration of enemy forces. What is she doing? Caxvera whispered. ZYXTALA found herself unable to answer. She was experiencing something entirely outside her frame of reference. The cold sensation had spread through her entire nervous system. Her tactical computer was providing steady streams of analysis, but for the first time in her career, she wasn't listening. She was feeling something that her species had evolved beyond millions of years ago. Something primitive and terrible and utterly alien. She was afraid, not of death. Death was simply the cessation of function, no more frightening than sleep. Not of defeat. Defeat was a tactical outcome to be analyzed and learned from. She was afraid of the implications of what she was witnessing. These humans, these small, soft, impossible creatures, had just demonstrated something that challenged everything the Velthari understood about warfare, about logic, about survival itself. They had willingly sacrificed themselves not for territory or resources or strategic advantage, but for 17 individuals of their own species. Individuals they had never met, who could provide them no benefit, who were effectively strangers. And they had done it without hesitation. "Commander," Kaxvera's voice seemed to come from very far away. "The Krexnari are hailing us. They're demanding we stay clear while they finish the human ship." Zwaxdala stared at the tactical display. The Defiance was outnumbered 50-1. Its weapons were nearly depleted, its shields failing, its hull breached in 17 places. By every rational measure, it was already destroyed. And yet it kept fighting. "Commander, what are your orders?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Zwaxdala's entire worldview, built over 3 millennia of experience, was crumbling as she watched a single primitive ship hold off an entire enemy formation through nothing more than sheer, impossible determination. The cold feeling was spreading, getting worse. She recognized it now from ancient texts and historical records. This was what her ancestors had called fear, the emotion her species had evolved beyond. But if her species had evolved beyond fear, what did that make these humans who clearly had not? "Commander," Zwaxdala's claws clicked against her command console as she made a decision that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. "All ships," she commanded, her voice carrying across the fleet communication network. "Prepare for immediate assault. Target the Krexnari formation around the human vessel." "Commander," Kaxvera's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Our orders are to maintain strategic distance until the Krexnari have finished their current engagement. Intervention would violate the Kethvar Accords." "The Kethvar Accords," Zwaxdala said slowly, watching as the Defiance's point defense systems tore through another wave of Krexnari fighters, "do not account for humans." She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. The Velthari fleet descended upon the Krexnari formation like crystalline death incarnate. Zwaxdala's dreadnought led the charge, its primary weapons cutting through bioships with surgical precision. Around her, 51 warships unleashed centuries of accumulated military doctrine in a perfectly coordinated assault. But even as her ships tore through enemy ranks, Zwaxdala's attention remained fixed on the small human vessel still fighting in the center of the engagement. The Defiance should have been destroyed dozens of times over, yet somehow it continued to exist. Its pilot flew with a combination of desperate creativity and calculated insanity that defied everything Zwaxdala thought she knew about space combat. "Direct hit on the human vessel," reported her tactical officer. "Their main drive is offline." The Defiance tumbled through space, venting atmosphere and plasma. On any rational battlefield, its captain would have surrendered. Instead, the ship's remaining weapons continued firing even as it spun helplessly through the debris field. "Hail the human ship," Zwaxdala ordered. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main screen, blood running from a gash on her forehead, her uniform torn and scorched. Behind her, sparks cascaded from damaged systems while her crew worked frantically at their stations. "This is unexpected, Commander," Chen said, managing what might have been a smile despite her circumstances. "Thanks for the assist. Your vessel is heavily damaged. Prepare to receive our rescue craft." "Negative. We still got fight left in us. My chief engineer says he can get the drive back online in 10 minutes. Zwaxdala's secondary eyes focused on the human's expression. Even facing certain death, Chen showed no signs of fear. If anything, she seemed almost energized by the chaos surrounding her. "Your ship is venting atmosphere. Your weapons are at 15% capacity. Rescue is the logical option. Maybe for you." Chen's image flickered as another explosion rocked her bridge. "But we didn't come this far to get pulled off the field. Besides, your people fight like you've never seen anything truly desperate before." The transmission cut as the Defiance's communications array overloaded. Zwaxdala stared at the empty screen, Chen's words echoing in her mind. "Fight like you've never seen anything truly desperate before." The Krexnari fleet was falling back, their perfect formations shattered by the unexpected intervention. But even as victory became apparent, Zwaxdala found herself analyzing the engagement from an entirely new perspective. Her fleet had achieved victory through overwhelming firepower and superior tactics. Standard doctrine executed flawlessly. The humans had fought using methods that made no tactical sense whatsoever, Yet they had somehow lasted long enough for rescue to arrive. More importantly, they had accomplished their primary objective. Those 17 civilian lives were safe. Commander, Caxvera reported, the human vessel has restored main power. They're moving to assist in pursuing the retreating Krexnari. Through her ship's sensors, Zwaxthala watched the battered Defiance accelerate after the enemy fleet. One small, damaged ship chasing after dozens of bio-vessels that could still easily destroy it. Signal the human ship to maintain current position, she ordered. They're not responding, Commander. Wait, they're broadcasting on general frequencies. Chen's voice filled the bridge. This is Captain Chun to all ships. The Krexnari are regrouping at coordinates 77 Alpha. Recommend immediate pursuit before they can establish defensive positions. The tactical assessment was correct. The Krexnari were indeed falling back to a prepared defensive position near the system's outer asteroid belt. But for a damaged ship with limited weapons to recommend pursuit was beyond audacious. The human is offering tactical advice, Caxvera observed, her tone carefully neutral. Zwaxthala considered this. In 3,000 years, she had never received strategic input from an alien species during combat operations. The very idea bordered on the absurd. Yet Chen's assessment matched her own tactical computer's analysis perfectly. Open a channel to Captain Chun. Chen's bloodied face reappeared on screen. Commander, if we move fast, we can catch them before they dig in. My ship's damaged, but we can still provide support. Captain, with respect, your vessel is barely functional. You should return to port for repairs. Port? Chun laughed, a sound that somehow conveyed both exhaustion and exhilaration. The nearest human port is 3 weeks away. Besides, we're not done here. Those Krexnari will be back, and next time there might not be anyone around to help the civilians. This was beyond Zwaxthala's comprehension. The humans had achieved their stated objective. They had saved the lives they came to save. By any rational standard, their mission was complete. Yet Chen spoke as if the engagement was just beginning. Explain your reasoning, Captain. Simple. The Krexnari hit this system because it was undefended. They'll hit the next undefended system, and the one after that. Every day we let them regroup is another day they use to plan their next harvest. The word harvest carried darker implications when applied to Krexnari operations. Unlike most species, the Krexnari didn't simply conquer worlds. They consumed everything, stripping planets of all biological matter to feed their expanding hive consciousness. You propose to engage a retreating enemy fleet with a single damaged vessel. I propose we engage them together. Chen's expression grew serious. Look, Commander, I don't know much about your people's politics or military doctrine, but I know what desperation looks like, and I know what happens when good people do nothing. If you want to turn back, that's your call. But we're going after them. The transmission ended again, and Zwaxthala watched as the Defiance accelerated toward the asteroid belt where the Krexnari were taking position. A single human ship, moving to engage an enemy fleet that outmassed 1,000 to 1. Commander, her tactical officer reported, long-range sensors detect additional Krexnari reinforcements approaching from the Vega system. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. The strategic picture crystallized in Zwaxthala's mind. The Krexnari retreat wasn't a defeat, it was a delaying action. They were buying time for reinforcements to arrive and establish a permanent foothold in this sector. If they succeeded, 3 more star systems would fall within a month. Standard Velthari doctrine called for withdrawal and regrouping. They had achieved their immediate tactical objective by driving off the initial Krexnari fleet. High Command would expect them to consolidate their position and await orders for the next engagement. But as she watched the small human ship disappearing into the asteroid field, Zwaxthala realized that standard doctrine might not be applicable to this situation. All ships, prepare for pursuit course, she commanded. Commander? Caxvera's surprise was evident in her voice. Protocol requires us to report to High Command before engaging in extended operations. Protocol assumes we are facing a conventional enemy using conventional tactics, Zwaxthala replied. The humans have demonstrated that conventional assumptions may be inadequate. Her fleet moved to follow the Defiance into the asteroid belt. What they found there would challenge every assumption about warfare that the Velthari had developed over millions of years of evolution. The Krexnari had indeed established defensive positions among the asteroids, using their bioships' organic hulls to blend with the rocky environment. It was a sound strategy, The asteroids provided cover while limiting the maneuverability of larger ships. The Defiance was already engaged when the Velthari fleet arrived. But instead of maintaining distance and exchanging fire, Chun had apparently decided to use the asteroids themselves as weapons. Tactical analysis of human activities, HFY ordered. The human ship appears to be mining asteroids while under fire, Commander. They're using some form of explosive charges to fracture large asteroids, then using the debris as projectiles. HFY watched in fascination as the Defiance darted between asteroid clusters, setting charges and directing the resulting debris clouds toward Krexnari positions. It was crude, improvised, and absolutely devastating. Several bio ships had already been crushed by multi-ton rock fragments moving at orbital velocities. They're turning the environment into a weapon, Caxvera observed. Indeed. Signal all ships, coordinate with the human vessel. Follow their targeting solutions. For the next 3 hours, the combined fleet waged the strangest battle in recorded military history. The Velthari provided covering fire and strategic positioning, while the humans identified opportunities to weaponize the asteroid field itself. Chen's crew had apparently studied the tactical environment during their approach and developed an entire doctrine for asteroid-based warfare in the span of minutes. The Krexnari, masters of adaptive tactics themselves, found their hive mind consciousness struggling to process the sheer unpredictability of human combat methods. Every time they adapted to one approach, the humans would devise something completely different. When the Krexnari reinforcements arrived 6 hours later, they found the asteroid belt transformed into a debris field filled with the wreckage of their advanced fleet. Status report. HFY demanded as the new enemy forces took positions at the system's edge. Krexnari reinforcements number 137 vessels, including 3 hive ships. Our combined fleet strength, 52 Velthari warships and 1 human vessel. The mathematics were not encouraging. Even with the element of surprise, they were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. The logical response was immediate withdrawal. Signal Captain Chun. Chen's image appeared, her uniform now completely torn and her face covered in soot. Commander, my tactical officer thinks the new arrivals include hive ships. That changes the equation significantly. Agreed. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance. Or, Chun said, and Agthala could see that dangerous light in her eyes again. We could end this right here, right now. Explain. Hive ships are command and control centers. Take them out, and the rest of the fleet loses coordination. But they'll be heavily defended, probably in the center of their formation. Correct. Which makes them effectively immune to assault. Not necessarily. Chun turned to someone off-screen, then looked back at HFY. My engineer has been analyzing the debris field. All those asteroid fragments we've been throwing around, they've created a pretty comprehensive sensor shadow. The Krexnari can't see everything that's happening in there. HFY's tactical computer began running projections based on Chen's observation. The results were interesting. You're proposing to use the debris field to mask an approach. I'm proposing something a little crazier than that. Chen's smile was becoming familiar, and HFY was beginning to understand that it usually preceded something completely insane. What if we could get a small force through their perimeter and take out those hive ships before they realize what's happening? Their perimeter consists of over 100 warships. Right, which is why they won't expect a direct assault through the middle of it. The cold feeling was returning. HFY recognized it now as fear, but she was beginning to understand that fear might not be the evolutionary weakness she had always assumed it to be. Fear was information data about risk and consequences that her rational mind might overlook. And right now, fear was telling her that Chen's proposal was absolutely, completely, utterly insane. It was also their only chance of preventing 3 star systems from falling to the Krexnari harvest fleet. Elaborate on your tactical concept, Captain. Chen's smile widened, and HFY realized she was about to learn something new about the relationship between fear and courage. The plan is simple in concept, Chen explained, her image flickering as the Defiance's damaged systems struggled to maintain a connection. We use the debris field to mask our approach, punch through their screening formation, and hit the hive ships before they can coordinate a response. ZYX Thala's tactical computer immediately began highlighting the flaws in this strategy. Captain, even assuming we could penetrate their perimeter undetected, the hive ships will be protected by overlapping defensive fields. A direct assault would be suicide. Probably, Chun agreed cheerfully. That's why we're not going to assault them directly. The human's casual acknowledgement of probable suicide struck ZYX Thala as profoundly disturbing. In Velthari culture, the preservation of one's existence was the highest priority in any tactical situation. These humans seemed to regard their own survival as merely one factor among many. Explain your alternative approach. Chen turned to consult with her tactical officer, and ZYX Thala caught fragments of their conversation. Words like fusion cascade and chain reaction that suggested something far more catastrophic than a conventional assault. My engineer has been studying the Krexnari bio-ship's energy signatures, Chun continued. Those hive ships aren't just command centers. They're also massive fusion reactors providing power to the entire fleet through some kind of organic energy-sharing network. This was accurate. Krexnari technology relied heavily on biological systems that functioned more like living organisms than traditional machinery. The hive ships served as both brains and hearts for their fleets. If we could overload the energy-sharing network, Chun said, we might be able to trigger a cascade failure that would disable the entire fleet. The energy required to overload a hive ship's reactor would exceed the output of our entire combined fleet. Unless we didn't try to overload it from the outside. Chen's expression grew serious. What if we got inside the energy-sharing network and triggered the overload from within? ZYX Thala felt her primary nervous cluster shiver as the implications became clear. You're proposing to somehow integrate human technology with Krexnari biological systems. My engineer thinks it's possible. The Defiance has been taking sensor readings throughout this engagement. We've mapped the basic structure of their network. It's complex, but it follows predictable patterns. Captain, even if such integration were possible, it would require physically accessing a hive ship's core systems. The ship attempting such a maneuver would be destroyed in the process. Yes, Chen said simply. It would. The human's matter-of-fact acceptance of this reality sent another wave of that cold, primitive emotion through ZYX Thala's consciousness. Chen was proposing a suicide mission with the same tone she might use to discuss weather conditions. And you would volunteer for this mission? If necessary. But I was hoping we could find a better solution together. ZYX Thala's mandibles clicked in confusion. Better in what sense? Better in the sense that more of us survive to see tomorrow. Chen paused, studying something off-screen. Commander, can I ask you something? Proceed. Why did you intervene in our engagement with the Krexnari? Your species has been fighting this war for centuries. We're complete unknowns who showed up out of nowhere. From a strategic standpoint, it would have made more sense to let us die and learn from observing the engagement. The question struck at the heart of something ZYX Thala had been avoiding since the moment she gave the order to attack. Why had she intervened? The tactical justification was minimal. One small ship could provide negligible support to her fleet. The strategic implications were potentially negative. Involving unknown aliens in military operations violated numerous protocols. Your tactics demonstrated unprecedented characteristics, she said carefully. It seemed prudent to preserve you for further study. Chen's expression suggested she found this explanation incomplete. Commander, with respect, you could have studied our wreckage just as easily. I think there's something else. Before ZYX Thala could respond, her communications officer interrupted. Commander, the Krexnari fleet is beginning to advance. They're moving into attack formation. On the tactical display, the massive enemy fleet was indeed approaching. 137 bioships moving in the perfect coordination that made Krexnari forces so formidable. At their current rate of approach, engagement would begin within 2 hours. Time for philosophical discussions has ended, ZYX Thala announced. Captain Chun, if you have a viable tactical proposal, present it now. Right. Chen's image became crisp and focused as the Defiance's damaged systems seemed to respond to her urgency. Here's what we know. The hive ships coordinate their fleet through biological networks that function like neural pathways. If we can introduce a disruptive signal into that network, we might be able to cause system-wide failures. How do you propose to introduce such a signal? Physical contact. One ship makes direct contact with a hive ship's hull, interfaces with their bio network, and transmits a virus-like program designed to propagate through their entire command structure. ZYX-Thala's tactical computer ran projections on this concept. The results were not encouraging. Probability of mission success, 12%. Probability of survival for the contact ship, 0%. Those aren't great odds, Chen admitted, but they're better than trying to fight this fleet conventionally. Explain your reasoning. Simple mathematics, Commander. In a conventional engagement, we lose. Maybe we take some of them with us, but ultimately, they have overwhelming numerical superiority. This plan gives us a small chance of total victory versus no chance of survival. The logic was sound, if one accepted the premise that survival was not the primary objective. ZYX Thala found herself struggling with this concept. For her species, survival was always the primary objective. All other considerations were secondary. Furthermore, Chun continued, even if the mission fails, it will provide valuable intelligence about Krexnari systems that could be used in future engagements. Intelligence that would die with the ship attempting the contact. Not necessarily. We'll be transmitting all sensor data in real time. Your ships will record everything, even if we don't make it back. The casual way Chun discussed her own death was becoming deeply disturbing to ZYX Thala. Captain, you speak of dying as if it were a routine operational parameter. Isn't it? Chun looked genuinely confused. Commander, every military operation carries risk of death. The question isn't whether we might die. It's whether our deaths accomplish something worthwhile. This perspective was so alien to Velthari thinking that ZYX Thala struggled to process it. Her species had developed elaborate protocols designed to minimize casualties while achieving objectives. The idea of voluntarily accepting certain death as an acceptable outcome was beyond her comprehension. Your species views death differently than ours, she observed. Maybe. Or maybe we just have different priorities. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. Commander, what happens to your people if the Krexnari establish a permanent foothold in this sector? Multiple star systems will fall. Billions of lives will be lost over the following decades. And that's acceptable to preserve a few dozen ships today? The question hit ZYX Thala like a physical blow. When stated in those terms, the mathematics became stark and unavoidable. Preserving her fleet today meant condemning billions to death later. You're suggesting that tactical sacrifice can serve strategic objectives. I'm suggesting that sometimes the only way to save everything is to risk losing everything. On the tactical display, the Krexnari fleet continued its methodical advance. Time was running out for any decision at all. Captain, assuming we proceed with your plan, which ship would attempt the contact mission? The Defiance, obviously. We're already damaged, so we're the most expendable unit in the fleet. Plus, my engineer designed the interface system. We're the only ones who know how to use it. You would volunteer to sacrifice yourself and your crew for the possibility of saving billions of lives you have never met. Commander, Chen said quietly, that's what we do. That's what being human means. For the third time since meeting these impossible creatures, ZYX Thala felt the cold grip of fear. But now she was beginning to understand that fear was not the opposite of courage. It was courage's companion. Chen was afraid. Her crew was afraid. They were all terrified of what they were proposing to do. And they were going to do it anyway. I will not permit you to attempt this mission alone, ZYX Thala heard herself saying. The Eternal Dominance will accompany you to provide covering fire and sensor support. Commander, that's not necessary. Your dreadnought is too valuable to risk on this kind of operation. Captain, you have taught me something important about the relationship between fear and duty. Perhaps it is time I applied that lesson. Chen's smile was different this time, warmer, tinged with something that might have been respect. In that case, Commander, let's go save some star systems. As the two ships prepared for their impossible mission, ZYX Thala realized that fear was no longer her enemy. It was her teacher, showing her that some things were more important than survival. Some causes were worth dying for. The humans had known this instinctively. Now, perhaps, the Velthari could learn it as well. The approach through the debris field was unlike anything in ZYX Thala's extensive military experience. The Defiance led the way, its damaged hull somehow slipping between sensor shadows with an intuitive grace that defied conventional navigation protocols. Behind it, the massive bulk of the Eternal Dominance followed a course that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. Human navigation techniques are unorthodox, reported Lieutenant Caxvera, her voice tight with concentration as she struggled to match the Defiance's erratic path. Zhuangzi watched the tactical display with growing appreciation for the complexity of what Chen's crew was accomplishing. They weren't simply hiding behind asteroids. They were using the debris field's gravitational currents, electromagnetic interference, and thermal shadows to create a constantly shifting maze of invisibility. Captain Chun, she transmitted on a tight beam channel. Your crew's navigation skills are remarkable. Chen's response came back immediately. Thanks, Commander. My pilot served in the Asteroid Mining Corps before joining the military. She says this reminds her of home, except with more people trying to kill her. The casual reference to attempted murder as a mere occupational hazard continued to fascinate Zhuangzi. Human psychology remained largely incomprehensible to her, but she was beginning to recognize patterns in their behavior that suggested depths of resilience she had never imagined possible. Contact in 15 minutes, reported her tactical officer. The Krexnari perimeter is maintaining standard formation. No indication they've detected our approach. Through her ship's sensors, Zhuangzi could see the enemy fleet spread across space like some vast organic constellation. The three hive ships dominated the formation center, each one a biological nightmare of organic technology and alien intelligence. Around them, smaller bio-vessels moved in perfect coordination, their hulls pulsing with the shared neural energy that made Krexnari fleets so formidable. Commander, Chen's voice crackled through the communication system. My engineer has finished the interface device. We're ready to begin final approach. Understood. The Eternal Dominance will provide covering fire once you make contact with the target hive ship. Negative on the covering fire, Commander. Once we make contact, your priority is getting clear of the blast radius. If this works, the energy cascade is going to be spectacular. Zhuangzi's mandibles clicked in confusion. Explain blast radius. Well, we're essentially turning their entire energy network into a giant bomb. My engineer estimates the initial explosion will be roughly equivalent to a stellar core collapse in a small, localized area. The implications of this statement sent that familiar cold sensation through Zhuangzi's nervous system. Captain, you're describing an event that could destroy everything in the system. Not everything, just everything within about 10 million kilometers of the target hive ship, which is why you need to be well clear before we trigger the cascade. And you will be at the epicenter of this explosion. That's the plan. Zhuangzi found herself struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in Velthari philosophy. The humans were preparing to trigger what amounted to an artificial supernova, knowing that they would be vaporized in the process. They discussed this outcome with the same matter-of-fact tone they might use to describe routine maintenance procedures. Captain, there must be alternative methods to deliver the interface device. Maybe, but we don't have time to develop them. The Krexnari are already starting to spread through this sector. Every hour we delay means more worlds fall under their control. The tactical display confirmed Chen's assessment. Long-range sensors were detecting Krexnari scout ships beginning to probe neighboring star systems. Within days, those probes would become full invasion fleets. Beginning final approach, Chun announced. Commander, it's been an honor serving alongside you. Captain, wait dash, but the Defiance was already accelerating toward the enemy formation. Zhuangzi watched its sensor signature disappear into the maze of gravitational fields and energy emissions surrounding the Krexnari fleet. For 27 minutes, there was no contact. The Eternal Dominance held position at the edge of the debris field, its sensors straining to track the human ship's progress through the enemy perimeter. Twice, Zhuangzi detected signs of combat, brief flares of weapons fire, and the distinctive energy signatures of exploding bioships. But the Defiance's transponder remained silent. Commander, Caxvera reported, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations from the central hive ship. Something is happening in there. On the main screen, the largest Krexnari vessel began to pulse with erratic light patterns. The perfect coordination of the surrounding fleet started to falter as individual ships began moving in random directions. The human plan is working, Zhuangzi's tactical officer observed with undisguised amazement. The bio-network is experiencing cascade failures. But even as victory became apparent, Zhuangzi found herself focused on a different concern. Any sign of the Defiance? Negative, Commander. No transponder signals, no communication attempts. If they're still alive in there, they're running silent. Through the chaos of the failing Krexnari formation, Zhuangzi tried to imagine what Chun and her crew were experiencing. They had somehow penetrated to the heart of an enemy hive ship, interfaced with alien biological systems, and triggered a cascade reaction that was tearing apart one of the galaxy's most formidable fleets. And they were still in there, at the center of an increasingly unstable fusion reactor that could detonate at any moment. "Commander," her engineer reported, "energy readings from the hive ship are approaching critical levels. Recommend immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance." Zhuangzi stared at the tactical display. Minimum safe distance would put them well outside the system's asteroid belt, far from any possibility of rescue operations. "Maintain current position," she ordered. "Commander, if that hive ship detonates, the energy release could damage even a ship of this size." "Maintain position." Caxvera turned to face her with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Commander, our survival protocols require immediate withdrawal from this position." "Our survival protocols," Zhuangzi said slowly, "do not account for humans." The irony of those words was not lost on her. She had spoken them less than a day ago as justification for intervening in the humans' hopeless battle. Now she was using them to justify remaining within the blast radius of what might be the largest explosion in galactic history. "Commander, incoming transmission from the hive ship." "It's Captain Chun." Chen's image appeared on the main screen, but she was barely recognizable. Her face was covered in some kind of biological secretion. Her uniform was dissolved in several places, and the background behind her looked like the interior of some massive organic organism. "Commander, we're inside the hive ship's core chamber. The interface is working, but there's a problem." "Explain." "The cascade reaction is happening faster than our projections indicated. We have maybe 10 minutes before this thing goes critical. But the bionetwork has some kind of failsafe system. It's trying to isolate the damaged sectors and prevent the cascade from reaching the other hive ships." Zhuangzi's tactical computer immediately grasped the implications. If the cascade reaction failed to propagate to the other hive ships, only 1/3 of the enemy fleet would be destroyed. The remaining ships would be more than sufficient to complete their conquest of the sector. "Can you disable the failsafe system?" "Maybe. My engineer thinks she can overload it, but someone would have to physically access the primary bioneural junction. It's located in a different part of the ship." The image flickered as something exploded near Chen's position. When it stabilized, Zhuangzi could see that the human captain was bleeding from multiple wounds. "Captain, even if you could reach this junction, you would not survive the return journey." "No," Chen agreed. "We wouldn't, but the mission would succeed." There was again that casual acceptance of death in service of a larger goal. Zhuangzi had observed this phenomenon repeatedly throughout her encounters with humans, but she was only now beginning to understand its true implications. "You're asking me to stand by while you sacrifice yourselves for the possibility of saving people you have never met. I'm asking you to remember why we're here, Commander. This isn't about us. It never was." The transmission began breaking up as the hive ship's internal systems failed around Chen's position. But her final words came through clearly. "Tell them we try to do it right." The screen went blank. For several seconds, the bridge of the eternal dominance was silent except for the hum of machinery and the soft clicking of Velthari mandibles, a nervous habit that Zhuangzi had never noticed before. "Commander," Caxvera said quietly, "energy readings are continuing to climb. If we're going to withdraw." "No," Zhuangzi said. "We're not withdrawing, Commander." Zhuangzi activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Commander Zhuangzi. Prepare for emergency rescue operations. When that hive ship detonates, I want every sensor array in the fleet focused on locating survivor signals." "Commander," her tactical officer protested, "the explosion will destroy any ship within the blast radius. There cannot be survivors." "Perhaps," Zhuangzi replied. "But if there are, we will find them." She had learned something important from the humans. Some things were worth risking everything to achieve, and some people were worth risking everything to save. Even if those people happened to be small, soft, impossible creatures who thought that dying for strangers was just part of doing their job properly. The explosion, when it came, exceeded every theoretical projection in the Velthari database. The first hive ship simply ceased to exist, its mass converted to pure energy in a process that lasted exactly 2.7 seconds. The cascade reaction propagated through the bioneural network faster than light itself, jumping from ship to ship across the quantum entanglement channels that connected the Krexnari fleet consciousness. 137 ships died in sequence, each detonation feeding energy into the next until the entire enemy fleet became a brief, artificial star that outshone the system's primary for nearly a minute. When the sensors finally cleared, the space where the Krexnari armada had been was empty except for drifting particles and the slowly expanding shockwave of superheated plasma. Tactical assessment, Zoexdala ordered, her voice somehow steady despite the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Complete elimination of enemy forces, her tactical officer reported. No survivors detected. No intact vessels. The humans accomplished total victory. But even as her crew celebrated the impossible triumph, Zoexdala found her attention focused on the space where the Defiance had last been seen. Her sensors showed nothing but dissipating energy and stellar debris. Begin search patterns, she commanded. Full spectrum analysis. Look for anything that might indicate survivors. Commander, Caxveris said gently, no biological organism could survive what we just witnessed. The energy release was equivalent to a direct hit from a stellar core. Continue searching. For 6 hours, the Velthari fleet combed through the debris field with every sensor array at their disposal. They found fragments of ships, crystallized plasma formations that had been flash-frozen by the explosion's aftermath, and trace elements that suggested the presence of exotic matter. But no signs of human life. As the 7th hour began, Zoexdala finally acknowledged what her crew had known from the moment of detonation. Captain Shun and her people were gone, vaporized in the same instant that they achieved the greatest military victory in recorded galactic history. Set course for Velthari space, she ordered. High Command will need to be informed of these events. But, as her fleet prepared to depart, something unprecedented happened. Commander, her communications officer reported, we're receiving an incoming transmission. Origin point unknown. Signal characteristics match human technology. Zoexdala felt her primary heart skip a cycle. On screen, the image that appeared was not Captain Shun. Instead, a young human male in a torn uniform looked out at them from what appeared to be the interior of an escape pod. This is Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez of the U.S. Defiance. Is anyone out there? The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as every officer tried to speak at once. Zoexdala silenced them with a gesture and activated the response channel. Lieutenant Rodriguez, this is Commander Zoexdala of the Velthari Imperial Navy. What's your status? Commander. Rodriguez's relief was visible even across the communication barrier. We thought everyone was dead. Captain Shun ordered us into the escape pods before she triggered the cascade. We've been drifting in the debris field for hours. How many survivors, Lieutenant? 17 of us made it to the pods. The captain and about half the crew stayed behind to complete the mission. Zoexdala's mind processed this information with growing amazement. Even facing certain death, Chen had somehow managed to save a portion of her crew. The woman's tactical brilliance had extended even to her own sacrifice. Transmit your coordinates. We will retrieve you immediately. As her ships moved to collect the human survivors, Zoexdala reflected on the implications of the day's events. In the span of less than 24 hours, these small, soft creatures had accomplished something that the combined military might of the galaxy had failed to achieve in centuries of warfare. They had broken the Krexnari. But, more than that, they had demonstrated something that would resonate through galactic civilization for generations to come. They had shown that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite fear. That some things were worth dying for. That sacrifice in service of others was not weakness, but the highest form of strength. 2 hours later, Lieutenant Rodriguez stood in the conference room aboard the Eternal Dominance, still wearing his torn escape suit, and looking remarkably composed for someone who had just witnessed the destruction of his ship and the death of his captain. Commander, he said, I wanted to thank you for intervening in our battle with the Krexnari. Captain Shun said you didn't have to help us, but you did it anyway. Your captain was correct, Zoexdala replied. We had no tactical obligation to intervene, but your crew demonstrated something that my people have forgotten. What's that, ma'am? That fear can be a teacher rather than a weakness. Your captain was afraid. I could see in her eyes. But She acted despite her fear because she understood that some things are more important than survival. Rodriguez nodded slowly. The captain always said that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. A wise philosophy. Tell me, Lieutenant, what will you do now? Your ship is destroyed, your captain is dead, and you are far from human space. Well, ma'am, if you're willing, we'd like to request passage to the nearest human outpost. There are other colonies in this sector that might need defending, and the Krexnari might not stay broken forever. This response was so perfectly, predictably human that ZYXThala almost found herself laughing. Even after witnessing their comrades' deaths and achieving the impossible, these creatures were already thinking about the next battle. Lieutenant, I have a different proposal. My government will undoubtedly want to study the events of this engagement. Your people's tactical innovations could revolutionize our approach to warfare. Would you and your crew consider remaining as military advisors? Rodriguez exchanged glances with the other survivors. What exactly would that involve, ma'am? Teaching us to be more human. I'm not sure I understand. ZYXThala's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Lieutenant, my species evolved beyond fear millions of years ago. We thought this made us superior warriors. But your captain taught me that fear and the courage to overcome it might be the most powerful military advantage in the galaxy. You want us to teach you to be afraid? I want you to teach us that being afraid is not the end of tactical analysis. It is the beginning of true courage. 3 months later, the first joint human-Velthari task force departed for the Outer Rim worlds where Krexnari remnants were still attempting to establish new hive colonies. The ships bore new tactical doctrines that combined Velthari precision with human unpredictability, creating something that neither species could have achieved alone. Commander Zegthala led the mission from the bridge of her dreadnought, but the tactical planning sessions were conducted jointly with Lieutenant Rodriguez and his surviving crew. Together, they had developed what historians would later call the Chun Doctrine, a military philosophy that acknowledged fear as a source of strength rather than weakness. The Krexnari, encountering this new hybrid approach to warfare, discovered that their hive consciousness was poorly equipped to deal with tactics that combined logical precision with seemingly irrational courage. Within a year, their remaining forces had been driven from civilized space. But the true impact of the humans' intervention would be felt for generations beyond the war itself. Fear, which the galaxy's great civilizations had long regarded as a primitive evolutionary remnant, was suddenly understood as a sophisticated survival mechanism that enabled beings to risk everything in service of something greater than themselves. The concept of willing self-sacrifice, previously dismissed as irrational behavior, was recognized as perhaps the most powerful force in the universe, stronger than any weapon, more durable than any armor, more strategic than any military doctrine. And at the center of this philosophical revolution was the memory of a small, damaged ship called Defiance, and its captain who had looked death in the face and smiled. Captain Sarah Chun never lived to see the galactic civilization that grew from her sacrifice. She never knew that her name would become synonymous with courage in 100 different languages, or that her tactical innovations would save billions of lives across the galaxy. But perhaps she would have appreciated the irony that her greatest victory was not the destruction of an enemy fleet, but the teaching of fear to a species that thought they had evolved beyond it. Fear had indeed been unknown to the Velthari, until humans entered the battle. Now, they understood that the absence of fear was not strength. The mastery of fear was. And in mastering fear, they had learned what it truly meant to be brave.